Hey everyone, it's Chrono with Headphones.com, and this is the Utopia 2022 edition. Let's talk about it. Okay, so the 2022 Utopia is, as suggested by the name, a new iteration or edition of Focal's beloved flagship model, of course the Utopia. It's become pretty much a legendary headphone at this point. It's, beloved by audio enthusiasts. Like its predecessor, the 2022 Utopia is powered by Focal's pure beryllium M-shaped dome speaker driver, and it shares pretty much identical specs to the original model when it comes to impedance, sensitivity, and total harmonic distortion. While both headphones are indeed similar, there are a few differences between the two models, and that's what I will be discussing and highlighting into today's video. Let's get things rolling by going over the basics. First, taking a look at the accessories. And well, what you get with the 2022 Utopia is basically what you'd get with the $4,400 premium accessories package version of the original Utopia. I know a lot of Utopia is getting a little confusing. You get a Focal carrying case in black to match the aesthetic of the new Utopia, a 1.5 meter cable with a 3.5 millimeter termination and a 1/4 inch adapter, as well as a 3 meter balance cable with a 4-pin balanced XLR connector. So not many changes there, but as we take a look at the Utopia itself, we can see there's been a significant facelift to the overall look of the design of the headphone. Now, while the original Utopia I thought had like a sporty look with the the carbon fiber yokes and the metal and red colored highlights on the ear cups, the 2022 Utopia has what I think is a much more elegant look with only red highlights on the inner side of the grille and darker colors for the text, which also happen to look more precise and sharper than the engravings on the previous models. Now, some of the other noticeable changes are the use of hexagonal patterns for the grille, like we've seen on the Clear MG, and the LEMO connectors are now integrated on the bottom side of the ear cups instead of being a separate piece on the outer side of the cups. Just a cleaner looking headphone overall. As for comfort, the Utopia still feels like wearing a Utopia and, well, other Focal headphones because it's using a design that we're pretty familiar with. So if you've seen other Focal headphones, have tried them, then you kind of know what one of these looks like and feels like to wear. I think that for the most part, this is a very comfortable headphone, but there are a few things to point out here, with the first being that the clamp force can initially be a little bit on the tighter side, and the other thing being that depending on the shape and size of your head, you might find the spring mechanism used on the ear cups to be a bit bothersome, as it may create additional pressure around like the lower side of your jaw, something which I've experienced with pretty much all the Focal headphones that I've worn, but it's definitely something where I'd say, your mileage may vary. Okay, enough of that stuff. Let's talk about sound. Performance and presentation wise, to me, the 2022 Utopia is pretty much identical in every way to the original Utopia. What you're getting here, it's a very resolving, nuanced, and articulate headphone that, despite having an intimate soundstage, it's a little forward, sort of like it is on the HD600 series stuff. It still delivers a fantastic sense of image distinction, instrument separation. It also has very clean and precise imaging. It's also worth mentioning that Focal's pure beryllium driver provides a very fast leading edge to transients and a tight bass response, which when combined with the exceptional sense of punch and slam that Focal headphones have, it makes for a very snappy and engaging listening experience that few other headphones can actually achieve. As for frequency response, there are really very few changes to point out here when compared to its predecessor, and honestly, the timbral quirks of the original Utopia are still very much present in this new 2022 model. For the lows, you're still getting an exceptionally nimble and well-textured bass response with great sub-bass extension. Just like with the original Utopia though, this 2022 model is a little bit lean in the region under 150 Hertz, so it could benefit from something like a bass boost toggle or an EQ bass shelf, just to give it a little bit more warmth and sub-bass rumble. Then, as we look at the mid-range, this is where the Utopia 2022, like the original, gets a little interesting due to some unevenness in the upper mid-range that affects the headphone's timbre. As is the case with many of Focal's headphones, the new Utopia has a bump at around 1500 Hertz in an excess of about 4 dB, which when you combine it with the slight peak that is around 4000 Hertz, that makes for an upper mid-range that feels a little bit nasally or boxy sounding. For the most part, I'd say that the mid-range tuning here is solid, but if you're a mid-centric listener and are sensitive to timbral changes, then this is something to keep in mind. Lastly, in the treble, there's again a peak at 6K that introduces a bit of glare and the slightest bit of low treble silence. But aside from that, I think that the treble tuning here is great. It's got plenty of sparkle in the mid treble and it's got really good upper treble extension. So if you watched or read my original Utopia review, which are by the way linked in the description, you're probably thinking that this all sounds very familiar. But there is one thing that I haven't mentioned, and that is to me the biggest change in sound between these two headphones. And that is that to me it seems as though everything above 1000 hertz has been downshelved by like maybe 1.5 or 2 dB. And the result of this fairly uniform downshelf for the upper mids and treble is that the 2022 Utopia has a tonality that is slightly warmer overall, but it really still has a lot of those tonal qualities and features that were distinct in the original model. So while it is warmer, it also retains a lot of the same timbre characteristic. What's the conclusion after listening to these two headphones and comparing them? Put simply, the 2022 Utopia is still a Utopia, albeit a slightly warmer one. And I don't think that's really a bad thing at all. If you currently own a Utopia, I will say that there's really no real reason to buy the new model, as I don't think that it's much of an upgrade. I think it's more of a side grade, if anything, since it's just like a slight tuning change. I didn't see any real like performance changes. For those who were considering buying the Utopia, there were two things I'd say. So if you liked the original Utopia but found it to be a little too bright, then the 2022 Utopia is definitely worth trying out, as you might enjoy its slightly warmer response more. If you weren't really that into the Utopia, because I don't know, maybe you find the timbre qualities it had to be sort of weird, you know, then it's probably best to look elsewhere, because the 2022 model still possesses, you know, still has those like quirks in the mid-range that hasn't really been sorted out. I think that's only something you can really figure out with EQ. That being said, though, the Utopia is of course still a headphone that belongs in the Summit Phi tier, and I dare say that to this day it does continue to deliver the most impressive performance I've heard from a dynamic driver headphone. So just like I said in my original review, if what you're looking for is the very best of what dynamic driver headphones have to offer, then look no further than the Utopia, but now it's available in a slightly warmer flavor. Anyways, that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful. If you did, do consider dropping a like. If you'd like to learn more about the Utopia or many other headphones, I highly encourage you to check out the review section available on headphones.com, which has been linked in the description down below. For more headphone related content, stay tuned by subscribing to The Headphone Show here on YouTube. And until next time, this is Chrono signing off.